My name is Sangmani Labut. I am here at the Eastside Freedom Library. Thank you for braving the weather and road conditions to be here with us in person. And for those watching us from home, your virtual presence and energy provides us with warmth during this cold winter evening. For our in-person audience members, please help yourself to a hot cider here to my left. So before I pass this along to my colleague to introduce the speaker for this evening, I want to tell you all a little bit about the Eastside Freedom Library. We are an independent nonprofit. Our work is around the intersection of immigration history, labor history, and social movements. The Eastside Freedom Library's goal is to preserve and promote knowledge about the Eastside, its history, residents, and institutions through educational collections and through programs like the one we have here this evening. And story is a major theme of the Eastside Freedom Library. And the telling of stories and gathering of stories through public programming, performances, exhibits, or vehicles for us to achieve this. And stories also really encourage us to fight for our relatives, friends, neighbors, and fellow humans. And so before we move on with the program, I want to give a few technical instructions for our virtual audience members. So we will have time for audience questions at the end of the event. If you have questions for our speakers at any time during today's event, you can enter that through the Zoom's Q&A function. If you are tuning in through Facebook Live, you can enter questions through the comment function. Please put the letter Q in front of your questions so our team can sort them out. And thank you for being with us tonight. And I'll pass it along to my colleague, Clarence, to give some introductory remarks and introduce our audience, introduce our guests for tonight. Thanks.
Thank you, Sang. And thank you everyone for being here tonight. I appreciate you coming out, and you are all true Minnesotans, even if you're not from here. So my name is Clarence White. I'm the Associate Director here at the Eastside Freedom Library, and it is my pleasure and honor to introduce three great artists, two of whom I have the pleasure of knowing and one who I just met today. So we are glad that this opportunity came to us, and I'm going to go ahead by introducing them. But first, before I forget, I want to thank Subtext Books for being here. They're the booksellers who have copies of the book for sale. If you are in the virtual audience, there may even be some signed copies that they will have at their shop that you can stop by and pick up or order, because they still use mail like us old folks. So that is totally cool. I don't know how you sign a digital copy of a book, but I'm sure there's a way, and you can probably auction it off or something like that. I don't know. So I'm not going to go there. So San Francisco's 8th Poet Laureate, Tongo Eisen-Martin, is an educator and organizer whose work centers on issues of mass incarceration and extrajudicial killings of Black people. He is the author of Someone's Dead Already, Heaven is All Goodbyes, which received the 2018 American Book Award, 2018 California Book Award, was nominated 2018 National California Booksellers Association Poetry Book of the Year, and then the book Blood on the Fog, which is the 2021 Golden Poppy Award winner for poetry, chosen by the California Independent Booksellers. And as a former bookseller at an independent bookstore, I definitely appreciate that. If you want to know what to read, don't look at the ads, find out what the independent booksellers are reading. So it's great to welcome you. But with us, we have two other amazing poets, both of whom are responsible for giving me a lot of homework, which I appreciate. And one of whom needs to get a typewriter, but we'll talk about that later. So Sue Hwang is a poet, activist, strategizer, and the author of Bodega, which received the 2020 Minnesota Book Award in Poetry and was named a finalist for the 2021 Kate Tufts Discovery Award. Born in Seoul, Korea, she was raised in New York, then called the Bay Area home before transplanting to the Midwest. So yeah, cool enough to come out in this weather. I'm not throwing any shade on the folks who are watching virtually. I definitely appreciate you. Totally. In fact, well, yes. A recipient of the inaugural Jerome Hill Fellowship in Literature. She is a teaching artist with the Minnesota Prison Writing Workshop and the co-founder with poet Sung-Young Shin of Poetry Asylum. Sue currently lives in Minneapolis, which is cool too, almost as cool as St. Paul. So, Michael Kleber-Diggs is a poet, essayist, literary critic, and arts educator. His debut poetry collection, Worldly Things, won the Max Rippo Poetry Prize, the 2020 Hefner Heinz Kansas Book Award in Poetry, the 2020 Bell Cones Poetry Prize. Is that okay? And was a finalist for the 2020 Minnesota Book Award. Michael's essay, There Was a Tremendous Softness, is forthcoming in A Darker Wilderness, Black Nature Writing from Soil to Stars, edited by Aaron Sharkey. And his poems and essays appear in numerous journals and anthologies, so get online and look them up because it's really dope stuff. Michael is married to Karen Kleber-Diggs, who is a tropical horticulturalist and orchid specialist, which means likes warmer weather. So you get to follow along when you're not following the career of your student of dance daughter, who is at SUNY Purchase. So with that, I'm going to pass it along only because we want to adjust the microphone again. And I will have Sue come up. Both Sue and Michael are going to read a piece of their poetry, and we'll pass it on to Tongo, who will read even more. And I'm totally looking forward to this. And I appreciate all of you for being here, and all of you for being here, and all of you and virtual land for being here. So Sue, I'm going to yield the mic to you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Clarence. Thank you, Sang. Thank you, everyone here at Eastside Freedom Library. And for everyone here, it's awesome to share space with you tonight. It's kind of, I don't know, it's crazy, but it's so nice. I don't know. It's like a winter wonderland. Right? Sort of. Well, it's a real honor to be here with everyone, and Tongo. Wow. Just as a longtime San Francisco resident before coming to Minnesota, this just feels extra special. So welcome to the Twin Cities, and I'm just going to read a poem from Bodega titled American Seismology, Queensbridge Projects, New York City, 1989. In the hall of our store with an elevated counter, I watched my mother rock away hours. The hawk weaves of braided hair, water guns, gold chains, Knickerbocker wares, AAA batteries behind bulletproof glass, walls outfitted with fake designer apparel. As my father duplicated skylines of brass keys, the machine's timbre rising above the base of souped up cars, I manned the rusty cash register during summer breaks. We three waking at dawn to make the trek below the bridge, where struts and trusses lanced shadows across the East River, high rises towering like distant mountain ranges. Out front, prides of wise men lingered on milk crates to rattle the day's news, rolling loose tobacco against limp dollar bills, while children chased on worn astroturf lawns behind wrought iron palisades with nowhere else to play. Hulking concrete monsters lurked above, their curtained eyes, barbed teeth, ready to devour heads, eviscerate, incarcerate. As women, young and old, sat on nearby stoops to escape the siren heat, humming age psalms, they cradled cooing newborns to their chests. Please, Lord, have mercy. As bands of white rookie cops circled a 5-block radius, hitting their nightsticks against accordion metal fences, memorizing faces to incarcerate, eviscerate. I'd count down the minutes till 6 o'clock when my parents switched off the lights, taking stock of these terrible hierarchies. Wages stuffed into the lining of their pants while I idled in the car as they locked up, the engine running. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Eastside Freedom Library. Thank you, Subtext Books. Tongo, I'm thrilled to be here with you and to read a poem and share conversation again, as we have a couple of times. I'm going to read a poem called "America is Loving Me to Death," speaking about themes that radiate in your work, Tongo, and in your work as well, Sue, and our conversation tonight, and some of the themes I know that we'll explore. And this is the poem that kind of jumped to the foreground. America is loving me to death. Loving me to death slowly, and I mainly try not to be disappeared here, knowing she won't pledge even tolerance in return. Dear God, I can't offer allegiance. Right now, 400 years ago, far into the future, it's difficult to ignore or forgive how despised I am and have been in the centuries I've been here. Despised in the design of the flag and in the fealty it demands, lest I be made an example of. In America, there's one winning story, no adaptations. The story imagines a noble, grand progress where we're all united, like truths are as self-evident as the Declaration states, or like they would be if not for detractors like me, the ranks of vagabonds existing to point out what's rotten in America, insisting her gains come at a cost, reminding her who pays and negating wild notions of exceptionalism, adding ugly facts to God's favorite nation mythology. Look, victors get spoils. I know the memories of the vanquished fade away. I hear the enduring republic erect and proud, asking through ravenous teeth, who do you riot for? Tamir, Sandra, Medgar, George, Brianna, Elijah, Philando, AJ, Eric. Which one? Like it can't be all of them. Like it can't be the entirety of it. Destroyed brown bodies, dismantled homes. So demolition stands even as my fidelity falls. As it must. She erases my reason too. Allows one answer to her only loyalty test. Yes or no, Michael, do you love this nation? Then hates me for saying I can't. For not burying myself under her fables where we're one, indivisible, free, just, under God, her God.
A lot of God can happen in 3 seconds. Not much heaven, though. Here's a man before a fight. A leave me alone type character. Emerging from the penniless death of a one-way street fiction. A fancy way of saying I'm gonna make it even if I have to drive backwards. All I have is chord changes and 1,000 backhands. Driving the street like I'm choking it, car full of nephews. Hasn't been a sun since November and there hasn't been a street I can't choke to death. This city better back down. You see this gun on the table? There's something about staring until it all feels stable. Why wouldn't I protect everyone? All my death sleep late. My son better be quick. My daughter better shoot first because we fall for no one. We fall for nothing. Okay, the first thing you'll feel is the heat. It's like, well, trying to tell me about possession. Drink life neat is what I mostly hear. And most of the world leaves me alone. To breathe smog like a giant, to go to jail every once in a while when the genocide kicks up in late May. When politicians have too easy a time, I'm guessing backwards out of one-way street in honor of myself. And in honor of you, if you understand the nature of the world. How long I've been just like my father? Well, hell of a resemblance as the anxiety of the neighborhood. This is a crossroads or a crossroads narrative. But so much crossroads, people get in the habit of turning back. Turn back only to find themselves remembering me, but not my last words. A man before a fight, you feel the heat, but there's nothing to keep in mind. There's nothing to remember. Really, there's nothing to be. There's just this moment, then another, then stare, then it all becomes stable, then the table lets go fuzzy, and Friday's an unfamiliar face peeking in the window. It's cool to panic for a second. Composure is wasted on your worst enemies. People are marked on that sidewalk. You're the only thing life-size. Everybody knows this in a wire hanger empire. When the blood stops walking, that feeling isn't father enough to be permission to fold. You better swing one more time. You know that father of yours rose from the grave and said, just give me 5 more minutes. He said, running water is a myth. It's us who are running up, down, all alongside this water. And people don't rise from the grave. They're not laid down either. It's us who flip all around their body. So beware when the people around you all look like they about to jump, it might be your time. You feel the heat. And when 4 walls demand to be 4 walls and the earth outside moves, don't panic. Don't try to recreate the earth outside. Don't tell jokes to yourself. Don't even talk disrespectfully to the 4 walls. Instead, unclench your fist and walk away. There might be heaven if you understand the nature of the world. From a 2-floor skyline, an abandoned house once talked to me. It said, young man, you are heroic and 10 years old. Among 20 generations of friends, your friends will free fall away. They'll free fall up. They'll free fall the walls with 5th grade speed to industrial paint behind secondhand fences. Young man, use quick knife tones. Be bone and brass. Be last laugh music. You're always leaving. Always one change of clothes from the door of life and escape. The 2-floor skyline said, you the God that dies in the middle. The friend more blues than skin. The face that cheap hotel schizophrenics can place with their 90-mile-per-hour right eyes among dry heat killers once children, 3 feet high and roaming and repeating and aiming at cotton mirrors that hang on breathing walls. You are 10 years old, tagging along, yawning at well-lit violence, whistling tool shop songs. You will be useful. You will be high and alone, flying on a nephew dragon from a $20 family in a sky that calls itself just more soil. Around walls that are just walls, except these walls suggest you make wives out of highs and currency. Here the air is polite to sleepy glass and bullying walls. Young man, you will come to admit that sometimes suicide is power. Because some people live stronger as ghosts. And sometimes the afterlife empties billions of souls into objects like playground bullets and abandoned door frames. Even broken glass will prove it has voice too. There are 24 hours behind your back. Look over your shoulder right now. Can you hear it? The sound of drums punching themselves out. The sound of piano parts learned in between assassination attempts. Be bone and brass. Be bone enough for 2 souls. Be invincible again. Suffer red-eyed accents, professional fingertips. Gifted victim, 6 in the morning beer, the first month of probation. To shout at the wall, see these words that shouldn't be home. Look behind you again. Be invincible again. Be windward. Be a sad machete. Be her son. Be a thief. Steal his back. Laugh too long. And never look away. The afterlife will empty and walk you home. I go to the railroad tracks and follow them to the station of my enemies. A cobalt-toothed man pitches pennies at my mugshot negative all over the United States. There are toddlers in the rock. I see why everyone out here got in the big cosmic basket and why blood agreements mean a lot and why I get shot back at. I understand the psycho-spiritual refusal to write white history to take the glass freeway. White skin tattooed on my right forearm, ricochet sewage near where I collapsed into a rat-infested manhood. My new existence is living graffiti. In the kitchen with a lot of gun cylinders to hack up. House of God in part, no cops in part. My body brings down to Christmas. The new bullets pray over blankets made from the old bullets. Pray over the 28th hour's next beauty mark. Extrajudicial Confederate statue restoration. The waistband before the next protest post. Hey, by the way, time is not an illusion, Your Honor. I will save your deaths for last. You're witty, Your Honor. You're moving money again, Your Honor. It's only raining one thing. Non-white cops and prison guard shadows reminded me of spoiled milk floating on an oil spill. A neighborhood making a lot of fuss over his demise. A new lake for a Black Panther party. Malcolm X's ballroom jacket slung over my son's shoulder. The figment of village. A new noose to a new white preacher. All in that fact painting for president. Bought slavery some time, didn't it? The tattered screeches of military boats and election Tuesday cars. A cold-blooded study in leg irons. Proof that some white people have actually fondled nooses. That sundown couples made their vows of love over opaque peach plastic. And boat action audiences, the mega every second, definitely my favorite law of science. Final news clippings and primitive Methodists, my arm changes imperialisms. Simple policing versus structural frenzies. Elementary school script versus even wider white spectrums. Artless bleeding and the challenge of watching civilians think. Terrible rituals they have around the corner. They let their elders beg for public mercy. I'm gonna go ahead and sharpen these kids' heads and their L's myself and see how much gravy spills out of family crest. Modern fans, with their t-shirt poems and t-shirt guilt and me having on the cheapest pair of shoes on the bus, I have no choice but to read the city walls for signs of my life. You know, apparently too much of San Francisco was not there in the first place. This dream requires more condemned Africans, or put another way, state violence rises down, or still life is just getting warmed up, or army life is looking for a new church and ignored all other suggestions, or folktale writers have not made up their minds as to who is going to be their friends. You know, this is the worst downtown yet. And I've bought a cigarette everywhere. I'm thinking many a walk to the back of a bus, they're lit on out the back of a storyteller's prison sentence, then on out the back of slave scars, but this is my comeback face. I left my watch on the public bathroom sink and took the toilet with me. Threw it at the first bus I saw eating single mothers half alive. It flew through the bus line numbered and on out the front of the White House. Hey, hopefully you find comfort downtown, but if not, we brought you enough cigarette filters to make a decent winter coat, a special species of handshake. Let's all know who's king and what's the lifespan of uniform cloth. This coffin needs to quit acting like those are birds singing. Rusty nails have no wings, have no voice other than that of a white world down there. Book pages in the gas pump. Hey, catchy, isn't it? The way 3 nooses is the rule, or the way potato sack masks go so well with radio codes, or the way condemned Africans fought their way back to the ocean, only to find waves made of 1920s burnt up piano parts, European backdoor deals, and red flowers for widows who spent all day in the sun mumbling in San Francisco. Red flowers, but what's the color of a doctor visit? There are book titles in the streets. Book titles like Hero, You'd Make a Better Zero, or Hey Fur Coat Lady, The President is Dead, or Pay Me Back in Children, or They Hung Up Their Bodies in Their Own Museums. And other book titles pulled from a drum solo. Run here, hero. Lied to hiding place. All the bullets in 10 precincts know where to go. There's no heaven on the other good idea in the sky. Politics means that people did it and people do it. Understand that when in San Francisco and other places that was never really there. I bet this ocean thinks it's an ocean, but it's not. It's just 6th Dimension Street. All know who's king. King of thin things, you know. Like America, I'm proud to deserve to die. I'm going to eat my dinner extra slow tonight in this police state candy dispenser you all call a neighborhood. No set of manners goes unpunished. Never mind a murderer's insomnia or the tea kettle preparing everyone for police sirens. These little societies, they wander together like hopeful drops of a virus. Citizen testaments bent on offering me a nation of breadwinners to hold me back, like it's a Brinks. I wrinkle the concrete sometimes like flesh. My Martin Luther King permanence turned away from a podium into the reeds like God is the dangerous twin. Black August to the mountaintop, balcony on my bedroom floor. You know they steal you from the earth itself and suspend you in your broken neck from their fullest euphoria, from the loyalty oath to their gray superstition, loyalty oath to their agrarian reform. I returned to my mother completely disrespected. For pulling the heat off of purgatory, they kill poets like me. Walk me away from my poems, never to be heard from again. In this final industrial complex, or bloodlines picked over, picked through a sport and spiritual death of your devil at least half made, police become a pretty word. I'm reading the lyrics mob shoestrings like they were tea leaves, teaching you how to write about cities. It's the 25th century in the mirror, people. Tyranny against your chump change you a chump to be mocked even with a gun in your car. A cubit of needlework spelled tune for the proletariat, the relapse ministry. Talented people curled up in the fetal position next to a diamond dime. Just another service day in the theatrics of tea house fascism, in a bouquet of surveillance cameras, in the poverty of God. New blue eyes, corpses of water, a newly potted presidency, a one big shiny coin if you ask animated capitalism and other non-literal voids. Killing is white freedom, the deification of hyphens, medicine bread and picture shows, great protesters in LA, guest of our ink, drop kicking rose in the gravy. I mean, this DC mink like a stone torn in half, the pen advances, despite CIA guideposts, despite non-African past and futures, a metaphorical but not surreal day, and a horn-ridden life horn player improvising king, like a radio prize fight featuring Shango himself. A real hand sweeps the land of racism. May I return to the ground? May I make progress with the gun? On our Mother Emanuel, they put on music that evening, a swinging tight body language for you to drink with fermented $5 bills. For your body language, some applause. My past stomach line ain't either a good thing nor a bad thing, like being psychic on the way to a lethal injection. It'll sit you down with Lady Day. Lady Day leading you to surrender their souls to Africa too soon. Potty thought floating in the cup of water she saved me, accessing my stomach, accessing the love of the American lynched. Cold sleeves wood and avalanche into the wrist. Our Mother Emanuel, avalanche into the sharp keys. Pain, the deal you make with pain. A piano makes sense for them. Laying hands on the world gradually, addressing the bend and necks on the streets of the north. Traveling, sailing in pain, repeating pain in the north. 10 trigger fingers on that piano if harmony would have me. Putting 100 fights on every direction offered her. Lady Day, leaning on trees again. Recruiting the countryside itself. Lay a plan on this lightning. Make your paws the corner pocket of men. I'll greet the bruise itself. America may clean my dead body, but will never include me. There goes the poet. Killing without killing. Never mind this painting of your language. May I be a meaningful lynching. A crow's passing. Good and dead by the afternoon.
Well,
Yeah, I just want to let that have some space, and thank you for that, Tongo. So many thoughts come to mind for me just listening to that poem. As you were reading, I was thinking, like, I know why we're in person now. Like, it translates, but there's something about being present here with you as you share that. I'm thinking about embodying the work, being physically present in the work. I don't work from memorization. The poem I read tonight, I don't know how many times I've read it, but and I don't know if the book is a safety blanket or what, but I just was thinking a lot about how important it is to be physically present in the work that we make, and wondered if you could speak on that a little bit.
For me, it's putting the poem in my head is the best way. It's the best way for actually selfishly. It's the best way for me to experience the poem, so that I can just relax into the various realities of the poems and the kind of inherent energy, and not perform the situation. Ironically, because it seems very performative, but it's really when I have a paper in front of me, then I feel like, okay, I am a poet and I am here to say some poems for people and all of this. Whereas, I can move more internally without the book in my hand. And then there's also there is kind of an opportunity when you get a poem almost down to a muscle memory. Then I have access to more, not powers, but just I have more sensitivities, or I can access more sensitivities as I'm going. That keeps me kind of, gives me an ability to do better by the lines, line for line as I move along, to do better by the words, to get just really sensitive to what this stanza is saying, or what this stanza could possibly say, and how this little energy I might be feeling in the moment can animate that stanza in a very singular way, in a way that they've never combined before, you know. So it just, it without the, almost like the, not just for me, without the, what's a distraction, or almost the preoccupation of reading, I can really get down more into the molecules of a poem and see what I can express.
I mean, wow, thank you, Tongo. It's not, I mean, funny, haha, but right before we started, we were just talking about nerves, and I asked you if you get nervous, because I was very nervous, and I'm still very nervous, and it changes, depends on the event or whatnot. But I had, in preparation for tonight, I had watched several of your readings on YouTube, and I could already tell tonight was different in the way that you read these poems than the other readings that I saw you at. And it was very clear that, yeah, you were definitely channeling or embodying a different energy tonight. Can you talk about, I mean, we both know kind of why, you know, what brings you to the Twin Cities and on this occasion, and sort of what are some of the energies that you're dealing with right now that sort of you channeled tonight in that reading?
Yeah. So a year ago, my cousin AJ Stewart was killed by a white supremacist in St. Paul. So I'm here
Just several blocks from here, right? I mean, not too far from even the library here.
Yep, in East St. Paul, and so, you know, I'm here to help advance organizing efforts that already been underway. And so, you know, that's definitely present, but also, you know, his mother is here, right there, and you know, the mission.
We're so sorry for your loss. I mean, it's the fact that it hasn't made, I don't know, there's just hasn't been any sort of justice for what happened to AJ.
Yeah.
Could we talk a little bit more about the case a little bit,
Yeah,
whatever
for
you're
sure.
comfortable with?
Yeah, I was just go in kind of conclusion though to the answer. What kind of the energy of the mission became really to give her some joy. You know what I mean? And so that's that. I actually felt pretty light as we was moving along. But what was the specifics of the case you was interested in?
Just the lack of justice that we've, I
So,
mean, in the last
right.
year, you know, sadly, I mean, you know, Minnesota is not a stranger to these sort of violences.
Yeah.
And I feel like your cousin's case hasn't really reached a level of awareness here.
And that's what we're trying to build, and awareness, and also, you know, you understand, like, I wager for all kind of murder, especially murder of Black people, a million people later, millions of people later, there's no real justice that could restore anything. You know what I mean? The loss of a loved one, especially to some white supremacist violence, where basically this cat stabbed him in the heart for parking in front of his house. So when someone gets taken away on the whim of somebody psychotic or somebody who has normalized the psychotic psyche, it's actually an expanding hole. It's a hole that gets opened every day, and how crucial, AJ was to the family, right? So unless they figure out, unless we can kill him every day, there's no justice we can get out this white dude. So what we can do though is not a kind of a justice for AJ, but a unity for AJ, and start putting together the necessary unity or the people power to prevent, these things from happening. And ultimately, we know the only way to guarantee prevention of this type of violence is a complete transformation of the system itself. So this is what, this is the main point of our organizing, is to create, the conditions for a revolutionary change,
There's one moment in the poem where you were leading into it, talking about a different kind of death, about suicide, but you said some people live stronger as ghosts. And in that moment, yeah, in that moment, I was just thinking about what it takes to be seen and honored and appreciated for your gifts and contributions, and how hard it is for some people to achieve that kind of dignity and respect in their life. I just wondered if you could speak on that a little bit too.
Well, it's, the thing about this little settler colonial project is, this life is no life at all. You know what I mean? And our kind of individual adventures don't guarantee a humanization for us or others. And so coming to terms with the fact that you actually, that we were kind of born to not to be dramatic, but we're born to a social death, right? We're born to a social death in only certain aspects of us, of ourselves will be incorporated, whether that's, 9 times out of 10, whatever little labor you can provide, or as Black people, the target you can provide this settler colonial project. So, for us, death is death is just another wall in the room. It's a kind of a natural, in a way. It's just it's the environment, right? It's the ruling class's intention, where the poet kind of enters, interestingly, or those who kind of just have a sensitivity to certain phenomena. It's also there. It's therefore a protagonist to take along with you on this struggle, for liberation.
Thinking about the three of us are literary artists. And there's one part of me that just thinks that everybody brings their gifts forward toward liberation, toward undoing the settler colonial project. I'm often asked, and I think independently, I often wonder, is art enough? Is art the right answer? Going back to another line in the poem, there goes the poet, killing without killing. I don't know. It's a line that allows for a lot of, a lot of responses, a lot of reactions. a lot of interpretations, and I'm not asking you to diagram it out for us, but I wanted to just share that I resonate with that. And it also makes me think about the role of the artist in the community. I know for you that shows up in a lot of ways. There's the Poet Laureate title, which is, I think it's helpful in promoting poetry and allows for a platform from which some good things to be done. And then there's also like the actual work of being out in the community, really organizing and agitating for change. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about all the different ways you kind of bring your art forward in that effort.
It's something that we all, it's almost like the mission is to codify that and make that program or make that praxis, because poetry is the right answer, but poetry is not enough, right? And so, a groovy, I think it was in Sister Outsider, Audre Lorde said that the poem is almost the kind of like a foundation for a new internalized liberation that your mind might not be able to handle. It's like the first step in building a piece of consciousness, right? So if I was to, task you with imagining a transformed, society, you might not know where to start, but the poet can kind of provide those almost embryonic shapes, Actually, Coltrane said the same thing, or to paraphrase, Coltrane said the same thing, that music provides these kind of shapes, these new shapes that thought can then kind of be built on top of. But ultimately, at this point in history, we see that the biosphere will not survive if we don't all drop our individual ambition and pick up this kind of collective praxis. Especially, you see the kind of the right word, really fascist march that the whole world has actually taken, that these empires or imperialist powers would save their capitalism with, that double down on the most violent tendencies within them. Resistance more and more is really is almost the only logical thing to do, because it's really only a matter of time, before one of yours is next or you are next. This is just facts, you know what I mean? And so at this point, it's almost a self-interest. It'd be in our best interest to set our minds to really transforming, to really resolving the social contradictions of this society. And we see also, selfishly, those of us cultural workers actually do better when we give our talents to this kind of praxis. So we look at, like, what's one of the greatest educators we could all think like now? If I said, who's the best? One of the best, we'd all say Paulo Freire, or a lot of us would say that. Well, he was just a cat that said everything is either the practice of slavery or the practice of liberation. And coming to terms with that, well, practice of liberation, now the classroom looks different, the curriculums look different, and even how teachers and student relate looks different. Similarly, if we come to terms that art, the facilitation of art, is either going to be the practice of slavery or the practice of liberation, regardless of how sly this little room, because we're the most manipulatable of of all of the noble profession people, right? Because they say, oh, look, come to our institution and say whatever you want, right? You don't have to, you can come up here and say fuck America and this, that, and and I'm not gonna go too far down that skit. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna go down too far down that improv, right? But you can say, you can say whatever, you can come here and say whatever you want, but all the while you're doing this, while you're there, you're really helping the ruling class reproduce its legitimacy, right? And we sit here and like, oh, okay, I'm cool, but I'm talented, but I'm not really doing something until I'm published here or performing here or have this type of title. So the bourgeoisie survives by our what becomes a kind of a class inhibition, right? And an unwillingness to come to terms with like, okay, now my survival and the survival of this here ruling class can't coexist or absolute stand in absolute contradiction, right? So in coming to terms with the reality of how the society really is set up and what makes it move and shake, now we can really see really what poetry really is almost like is intrinsic in it, which is just minds moving outside of social convention. And that's good news because we need minds outside of social convention because these set of social conventions are deadly, right? So if there was any society that needed liberation poets, it's this one, if there was ever a time in history, right? So but all again, like all, this is our day, almost this is our daily project, not really or nothing to, this is just this is our journey. It's not necessarily like, okay, let's get to a conclusion as quickly as possible. Let's figure out every day how we can be instruments of liberation. And oftentimes that comes down to just doing the boring work. Like in conclusion, I forget what the famous poet said. This famous poet said, the problem with being a poet is figuring out what to do with the other 23 hours of the day. You know what I mean?
Right.
So we got plenty of time. Well, we're gonna find that one out. But we got man, somebody please in the internet land get us that. But we have downtime, which can be used to to give ourselves even to a process that might be outside of our comfort zone. Because for me, it might not be the most comfortable thing to go knock on doors and stuff like that. It might not be the most comfortable thing that like I can't like what we do on the mic. I can't do nothing like that anywhere else. But instead of pursuing the never ending, it's just this society always wants us to just be as big and bad as we possibly can be and just stay where you big and bad. And instead of going where it's necessary for liberation, And with that in mind, really, I mean, like the late Terry Collins, who was a Black Panther, one of the leaders of the San Francisco State strike. He used to always come in. He used to be like, Ho Chi Minh was a poet. Che Guevara was a poet. He had a whole list. I can't even run it all down. Rest in peace, Terry Collins. But yeah, it's actually within our birthright.
Pablo Neruda was a poet. I had a workshop with Natalie Diaz once, and she spoke on after her first book came out, getting invitations from universities to come speak and understanding the context for all of that, what their motivations were. There are financial incentives connected to all of that. There's the pressure to take care of the rent and take care of your family and get yourself set up and maybe even have more time in the day, after that 1 hour to do the work of the poet.
Man, but at some point, man, you gotta just go ahead and say, fuck it. You know what I mean? At some point, man, somebody gotta just say, you know what, man? It might be better for all of us to starve, man, than to let this status quo keep going. I'll be in the same, Lord knows, I have the same problems and the same preoccupations, and being broke is like a whole emotion in itself. You know what I mean? It's rough, and when you got families to provide for, and you in this psychotic system that will kill you if you cannot provide. It's literally like it's provide or die. I understand, but you know, man, it's at the end of the day, we have to divorce our minds from these mandates, and we can pull a lot more off cooperatively. You know, if you know, there's a lot of aspects of life that if we were to move together, we would be able to provide for each other while we undertake this. And unfortunately, too, we also have to come to terms with the fact that it also is not just economic survival that a lot of us are chasing. We're also chasing the survival of some kind of social image we've created for ourselves, some kind of social reproduction, you know, because I had the same poems, in the exact same poems I was writing at a kitchen table in Mississippi when nobody knew anything or nothing. It was the same poems, it was the same energy. So I have to, like, you know, have to admit, well, what do I really need now? What was these groovy kind of individual walks actually necessary for my craft? You know, if the answer is no, then well, okay, what, you know, what in my praxis do I have to do to pick up the slack?
Well, and speaking of survival, you're born and raised in San Francisco, and
Shout out to my preschool teacher right there.
that was so amazing. When she came up before the reading, oh my gosh, that was amazing. And we were just speaking about survive, you know, having said that, I wanted to go back to San Francisco after finishing grad school here, but just couldn't afford to go back as a poet or as just anyone really who doesn't work like a crazy expense, you know, high paying, high tech job or whatnot. And San Francisco comes up a lot in your poetry, and it's obviously your place of home, but it's almost takes on it becomes a character too. And I read that you refer to San Francisco as a dystopia, where even the wealthy seem like they're incarcerated. And then I just recently read a piece in the New York Times about how San Francisco has now the most deserted downtown in any US American city, where I think like the occupancy rate is like the lowest it's ever been. And I have friends who've sort of calling it now sort of a ghost town, downtown San Francisco. And so it's sort of becoming what you've said for a long time. How do you feel about being a human in a place where it's just so hostile to survival and for anyone really, and just to a select few? And I don't know, how does that affect your poetry, your just general outlook?
Well, it does.
Being there.
I mean, it's an interesting kind of. It gives me a kind of a singular musicality because it's a weird. It's like it's a singular kind of metaphor of kind of, you know, San Francisco was a city. I mean, always in the grips of ruling class bullshit, you know, always been an apartheid town, you know. A lot of the black neighborhoods are lit, like, you know, be on the wrong side of the freeway instead of the tracks, you know. Environmental racism, crazy, disgusting. I mean, we got cancer clusters right in San Francisco. You have cancer clusters. You have everybody has asthma, you know. At the same time, though, you do have a city where historically kind of white supremacy was almost at least like kind of culturally weakest, almost aesthetically weakest. And you did have, so you had this kind of assertion of the mass imagination in very groovy ways, you know. You have the woman's building, you have you have this beautiful carnival, you have Fillmore, you know, Harlem of the West, and all these like very singular kind of cultural landmarks. But now completely, completely gutted by the whims of, you know, of this kind of this evolution of imperialism, or this equation of getting poor people of color out of the cities, and pushing them off in some kind of like Paris or Rio de Janeiro kind of equation. So for me, it's all kind of food, because it's like, you know, irony is what we play with, you know what I mean? But I will say though that, like, you know, San Francisco doesn't stand out. It doesn't, never, even in any past kind of glory, it never stood outside of the the contradictions that rule the rest of this society. And it really all is, and it should only be related to, in any kind of only special in a specific enough to figure out how to organize it, you know. And there's, you know, it has its own little ways, but it doesn't stand outside of our historical task. It makes for some interesting portraits, you know. I like making fun of it. You know what I mean? But it's the same, you know, mandate, no matter. And probably you drop me off anywhere, I'm probably gonna be making fun of it and trying to organize it. You know what I mean?
Well, as of 2020, Minnesota ranked second in the nation for worst median income and home ownership gaps between white and Black residents, and is 45th out of the 51 states when it comes to racial integration, making it one of the most segregated places in
You
the
know,
US.
like me and Tab was just talking about, AJ mother was just talking about, like, this is a sundown town, you know? And which, man, don't let me at this city, man. I mean, I tear this shit up too. You know?
Want to make sure. Okay. I think we're good. Are we good with sound here? Okay. Just people are sending in questions, so I want to make sure that we do that. I want to remind people, Subtext Books is here. Subtextbooks.com, I believe, is their website if you want to order books of any of our poets here. I wanted to announce something before I forget and we lose time. We have a lot of questions. I'm sure folks here have them, folks online have them, but on Wednesday, the 28th, December 28th at 6:30, Tongo will lead a teach-in on white supremacy and the recent evolution of militias. Since 2016, there has been a surge of self-organized and armed neo-Confederate tendencies. We witnessed the insurrection at the White House, but how deep and supported are these in our communities? So 6:30 Wednesday here at the Eastside Freedom Library. If you can join that, that is way cool. I want to make sure to engage the online audience, and there are several questions. I don't know if we'll be able to get to all of them. I kind of want to jump around, but I feel compelled to do them in order. I think you have addressed this one already. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to say about it, but Chaka Green asks, says, wanted to know what was your inspiration to do what you're doing now. I think that is mostly to Tongo, but probably for the other artists as well.
You know, it's at this point, I mean, art, movement, revolutionary activity. It's really all just one attempt to be a whole human being, to reanimate myself and reanimate our people, right? And so it exists in a space that cooperates with all moods, inspired, uninspired, you know what I mean? Frustrated, sad, depressed, happy, ambivalent. All of these energies really just cooperate with the task of humanization. So that's pretty much how that's pretty much how I move now.
Yeah, thanks. Your recitation was amazing. It reminded me of a lot of things, only a little bit more. I know, Michael, you were part of a series that the state colleges put together. And one of them was Hanif Abdurraqib, who read this amazing thing. I was expecting poetry, and it was poetry, but it was, almost this very precise stream of consciousness. And I think this sort of took it in another slant and into a new level. And this amazing montage, and it made me remind me of a lot of conversations we have here at the library about, this idea of empire and colonization and how we undo that. And we do it with scholar activists, we do it with artist activists, and it's hard to lie with that stuff. And when you're up here, there's another question from Hetty Tripp. I'm going to try and get through these, and maybe if someone has a question here, we could throw that in too. But what are your opinions in the ways that the Reverend Martin Luther King Day is celebrated? Have you poems that give critical thought to this?
I mean, I think it's important to mark the day. I think, like, my own attitude is there's no American holiday that isn't complicated and corrupted. I have some concern about set-asides, Women's History Month, Black History Month, days and months that we claim to lean toward including other stories and experiences. I don't want to speak negatively of Dr. King or his impact, his message, but just honor how in America things become commercialized. Which breakfast will you attend? That kind of thing. I like to think those gatherings have a lot of potential and can create conversations that can lead to change, but it's hard not to have some skepticism about how all of that is managed in America. And I think especially now, when so many things are happening, Dr. King, thinking about his work in Memphis, what he was organizing for and hoping to accomplish, that's very far away from what Tongo was describing as and articulating as the settler colonial project. And sometimes you celebrate King, but not the work. And I feel like that's a pitfall too. This is not me saying let's cancel it, but it is, I think, a real opportunity for us to think about how we do it differently.
And I want, it's like my little preoccupation. I want King back, man. I want Martin back, man. Martin is ours, I want him back. I think, man, that it needs to be a day of struggle. You need to spend that day engaged in some kind of struggle to really do right by his memory and also the trajectory that he was stolen from.
Yeah. Does anyone have a question here? There are plenty of questions online, so don't feel obligated to be the kid in class who answers everything. But if someone does have something, raise your hand, get my attention. But there's several pretty interesting questions here. There's a question from Yasmin Abdi. Tongo, how do you process whatever feelings, including any emotional costs or wearing down that may occur after repeated readings when you embody the strong feelings you speak on, and illuminate us for the listeners on the topic with this kind of heaviness, complexity, and nuance?
Man, by the skin of my teeth. Every day is a gamble. Man. I don't know which way is up. I think actually, like, the trick is really to almost the way out is also the way in. In that I really just try to, they're saying there'd be moments of intensity and heaviness, but really the whole, like, start to finish, I'm really just resetting myself over and over and over again in order to do right by the next line. And so the same way I get in there is the same way I get out, which is just to disappear, to not approach it like, oh, look what I just did. You know what I mean? But to just let it go and then be open to the next whatever the next kind of cognitive task. You know what I mean? And so that it actually, it's I experience it. It is heavy for me, but it's not permanent. It doesn't feel permanent. Every little place I go in the course of a poem feels fleeting, and actually is almost over before the next little line begins.
Yeah, I sort of have the sense that being the physicality helps respond to, like, those that weight and violence that we're talking about. So I mean, I don't memorize anything. I'm not good at it, but being free in that way, I think probably, I would guess, is a way to deal with that. Yeah. Here's a question here for all three of you. An anonymous attendee asked, since we're at the Eastside Freedom Library, I wonder if each of you would be willing to speak to the importance of libraries in your life, communities, or writing practices, since the Eastside Freedom Library is founded by academics, it's founded by the community. Everything in here, there's a lot of stuff in here, almost all of it was given to us. And the stuff that happens here happens because people come to us. But it is true, our co-founders are former professors. And each of you has advanced degrees. I wonder if you would speak to your hopes to see poetry continue to thrive outside of the academic spaces. And I think you've talked a little bit or hinted at that a little bit, talking about how, regardless to our identity, often we find ourselves in spaces that perpetuate that empire or that colonization. But, maybe taking poetry outside of the academy, but also putting community and real life and the real narrative of this world into the academy and the treacheries of that.
Well, for most of my life, I thought libraries were places where you checked out books and videos. And a few years ago, I was the poet laureate of the Anoka County Library System. When I met Tongo for the first time, we were talking to Crystal Wilkinson, and she's a poet laureate of Kentucky, and Tongo's a poet laureate of San Francisco, and I was the poet laureate of the Anoka County Libraries, but I was just like, hey, we're all sharing the message of poetry, just different and from different elevations. But through that work, I understood emotionally something that I think I also kind of understood intellectually, but didn't really grasp, which is that librarians are vital, engaged community activists. They provide so many resources, housing, information, access to computers. There's a reason why librarians are under attack today, and it's because the work that they do is that important. They help people connect to information, to opportunities, to community in ways that are hard to replicate in other spaces. As I said, I thought of libraries as a place where you checked out books and did research and that kind of a thing. And libraries are a huge part of how I would spend time growing up, checking out books, trying to read the most during the summer to get a little certificate and that kind of a thing. Yeah, I love libraries. I love their mission. They're important for the community and for the people in the community.
Well, I, as a daughter of immigrants and a latchkey kid, most of my childhood was spent in a library. You know, couldn't go home really because my parents weren't home yet. And so after school, my brother and I would take the bus, the late school bus, whatever, to the town's library. And I didn't really study there. I maybe hung out and with some friends and I don't know. Anyway, but no, it was a vital place. It was a place of sort of shelter and protection and a place to explore, just to like wander and yeah. So libraries are amazing, and I realize now after hearing you that to be a librarian is also is a form of activism. I think in this world, and I think activism comes in a lot of ways, like takes different forms, and I don't know. It's just to act, you know, to do something, to make a difference. What was the other question? There was like a two-part. Oh, outside, right. Yeah, I think poetry is music. It's a way for us to connect and tell our stories. And I think I have a lot of beef with the academic world, and I won't bore anyone here with that, but I think it needs to be egalitarian. I mean, everyone should have access. Everyone's a poet. I don't know. So yeah. So I mean, we all work in prisons, and yeah, I think poetry should be everywhere. So.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that poetry is music, and tonight is full of music. And I think that is, I started to understand and appreciate poetry when I viewed it that way, as music. And we have a friend of the library, musician, who doesn't like using the word jazz, but it's like, that's what I heard tonight. And just remembering that, and jazz is an American thing, and it's American because of who brought it. And so that yeah, I mean, jazz is the music of Black people, the diaspora, and that's true in this country. It's true in the Latin countries. It's true now all over the world, because the soundtrack, you know, is made out of that. So I don't know, anyone, I don't see any hands here, because these are great questions. Seriously, I want to give people a chance. So I'm going to skip to questions that were asked by people who haven't had a chance yet. Trish Zimmerman says, I think differently when I listen to poetry, tonight no exception. I experience the world a little more raw and hear hear its words and its joys more accurately. Why? What's poetry? Let's see. Why does poetry do that in ways that other ways of communicating can't?
I have to say, I was thinking about the same thing earlier, Tongo, when you were talking about the ways that poetry can allow us to think differently about the conditions of our society, of our societies, of our cities, of our world. There's so many forms of media, social media, and within that, all those different variations. There's print media and news, television media, and the media that we don't always recognize as media, but there's constant messaging and programming that we receive. And the question becomes, how do you break through that? Poems have the ability to do that on the page. They're portable. A message you receive in a poem is something that you can carry around with you. I think most people can think of a poem that just matters to them in a significant way. And then there are nights like tonight, where we gather, it's dark and cold, and we hear messages in a different way. I won't remember tweets I saw last week. I won't remember news stories I read a month ago. But I remember tonight for years, right? Because in addition to the topics that are shared, there's how they're shared. Sue is fully present in her work. I try to be. Tongo is as well. And there's something about that authenticity. I think about John Murillo, who said that in his first book, he thought about audience, and in the second book, he thought about listener. There's something about that connection, that closeness. You can tell that the artist is fully present in the work that they're making. And I think that radiates in a way that you can't duplicate in other settings. I don't feel like that's unique to poetry. I do feel like it's something art does extremely well. It could be a musician for that matter, but you can tell that they're serious, that they're invested in it, that they're present in it. And there's something about that commands us as listeners to come forward and be connected to that too.
That sort of segues into another question. So we've sort of talked about this. T. Riate Medina asks, Tongo, beyond being poet laureate, you play guitar. Okay. And often perform with musicians. Can you speak more about how music and poetry are embraced and elevated in your craft, specifically revolutionary music?
Is the guitar here right now?
The guitar is never here. And never will be. Man, you know, it's really interesting working with musicians. When if the objective becomes just to communicate with each other on a stage, it's almost like the individual expression of lines and notes, almost kind of, or as lines and notes as the final presentation actually dissolves. And it really just becomes a presentation of energy in a way that almost gives you the feeling that both lines and notes extend from the same kind of energy And I think that's like back to the kind of like the power of poetry, or why poetry can feel like thinking different, because when you're dealing with kind of, when you almost like intellectualize, I don't know the exact verb, but when you kind of, when you create almost these little statues of a stanza, right? Like you create these little statues that extend from the natural shapes of your mind, the natural shapes of how it moves, not the ones that are encouraged by the ruling class, not those that are encouraged or that you begin to mimic in order to get along with this hegemony. There's that liberatory power in that you come to see that within you and the way your mind naturally moves, there is all of the secrets of the universe that we are told only get translated, only get observed through white supremacist ideals. Right? And, you know, accompanied, I think, you know, in working with music, you really get that it becomes even more visceral. It becomes even more amplified if you all are really communicating. But ultimately, I think, like, you know, I will never, man, the guitar is never coming. The guitar is never coming out. What it taught me, though, or is teaching me, is just kind of the it just gives me more of a sense of kind of the like almost like the natural math of the phenomenal universe, and how math actually communicates through um pleasing sounds. You know what I mean? Or how beautiful, right? How beautiful raw dialogue can be with can be with reality. And you know, I think this is cousin to what poetry does. Man, this hypnotherapist inadvertently gave me some great advice as I was being what they call, I was being snarky. I was like, you hypnotize people? And she said, no. She said, I hypnotize myself. I put myself in a trance, and they are pulled into that gravity, right? Similarly, a poet is putting themselves in this way of going about reality, resting on your natural internal shapes, right? Resting on the supremacy of you and your people and your family, right? And that process pulls the listener in, pulls the reader in, and they then can start to mirror not necessarily your thought, but the way you're going about excavating thoughts. And I think that's why there's almost like an instant, like it's like waking up. And it has an enormous like liberatory consequence, you know. I always have to relate this, you know. Umar bin Hassan of the Last Poets, one of my favorite poets, you know, he was quite the knucklehead when and I asked him what put you on this political path of craft. And he said, man, I heard a poem. I heard a Mary Baraka poem, and it changed me. Talking to my mother about her her praxis, and she relates how a Diane DePrima poem kind of changed her praxis to a more, to lean more into women's liberation. So it's like there's something, there's almost if we successfully reside in that kind of portal or that opening away from convention and into, our natural power, it's like somebody sees you operating there and it's just like, oh, it's also like it's inspiring, but then it also puts them in tune with their nature and what's really going on inside them and what they can do with it. Like, I don't know, man, I just heard a poem and lines just started popping in my head. It wasn't, it's an instant process,
One of the library's co-founders commented, this conversation is so apt because right behind you is the collection of Fred Ho, who was an amazing activist, but a musician as well. And there's a picture somewhere in this vicinity of him all green with, I think it's a bass saxophone or something like that. I don't know. I failed music appreciation in college. So seriously, attitude.
How?
I explain it to my students. It's a not just a cautionary tale, but anyway. But and Marion McClinton's books are, I think, back here too. The director who worked a lot with August Wilson. Right above us is the work of Leon Hwang. There is a poster that references Attica. It has a typewriter in it. Speaking of instruments, the typewriter is the percussion instrument of poetry. So if you want a typewriter, you should get one. But there are a lot of other things here too. There is a lot of artwork in this space. Again, all of it was given to us because people in the community far and wide want to fill this space with good things besides the 35,000 books, or maybe it's more now. It grows every day. The person who has made sure they're all in the right places sitting in the back of the room here. So yeah. Hi, David. We're almost out of time. If that's a thing. I'm trying to think of anything else. I want to make sure that we got to all the people, if not all the questions. Tongo, are you familiar with the Bird and Beckett bookstore in San Francisco?
Absolutely, man.
Okay.
Shout out to Eric.
All right.
Who runs it, man.
All right, cool.
Whenever in San Francisco, you should go.
Okay.
That's actually where Bird and Beckett actually were my first book. Someone's Dead Already. The book release was actually in Bird and Beckett.
All right.
Yeah, and I actually, he does these great jazz nights where basically like there's actually a kind of stage similar. This is bigger, but like the bookshelves reveal when moved that there's actually a stage in there, and they have really good live shows. So tune in.
All right.
Go to the Bird and Beckett website.
Yeah. Yes. I'll repeat that. What do you all do for fun? I don't know. Is that what's get to have fun?
I don't do anything for fun. I
Uh,
mean, sometimes
I watch a lot of astrology videos right now. The last 2 years I've taken a online ancient Hellenistic astrology course. And you said strategist when you introduced me, but but I really have stargazer because I like to look at, so that's
Sorry.
kind of my fun, like sort of side hobby right now.
I will eat a cookie.
I like to have dinner at Sue's house. And I like to go swimming.
See,
And is writing a book about swimming.
yeah. Sorry. I mean, the reason why I don't get nervous is because I know I'm going to screw up. And it's like I'm old enough, so it's like, whatever. I'm going to mess this up. So
Clarence, I know we're near the end of time.
Yeah.
I wanted to just reflecting back on something you shared earlier and talking about it's either the work of slavery or it's the work of liberation. And as you were talking and sharing ideas on it, I just found myself thinking so much that the first liberatory act has to be to liberate the self, which is connected to thinking about our own relationship to capitalist structures and the ways that hegemony shapes like all the things that we do. I don't know that I have a question in here. I just wanted to depart by carrying forward how important it is for us as individuals, as artists, as community members, to just think about our relationship to all the structures that ultimately are bent on our destruction or silence or cancellation or however you want to think about it.
Yeah, and the groovy news concerning the poets is, you know, Freire actually argued that the beginning of your reabsorption of your social power, because that's another way of looking at what revolution is, right? It's just when we take back all the various social powers that we have, you know, allowed ourselves to be alienated from. The beginning is the naming of the world. And so, you know, that's a good nonviolent, easy to pull off exercise, right? For us to name the world ourselves, to name what's going on, to define ourselves, again, outside of ruling class prescription.
yeah. Thank you. I want to say one more time, on Wednesday, December 28th, teach-in. So keep that in mind. Again, subtext books, thank you as always. There are a lot of other things coming up in the new year. We had decided not to add anything to the December calendar because we have way too much going on here. But we made space for this and I'm glad we did. And I'm glad that everybody joined us for that. And for the folks who are here, drive carefully, get home safely. Thank you for coming. To the folks who are watching online, thank you for joining us. It would have been great to see you. And next time, when it's warmer, you can be here on our lawn. I think you're coming back in February. Maybe there will be some things happening there. It will. It will. It will. Yeah. So
March, maybe we should push back to March.
you realize people played football in this weather, you know.
So how dare we complain? You know?
Back in the days when those guys didn't make that much money, but
They still
it's technically, a lot of them really don't make that much money now.
February it is, man. I've been inspired.
But for all of us at the Eastside Freedom Library, thank you for joining us, and we will see you soon, hopefully. Good night.
Like,